So welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another battle replay, and this will almost certainly be the last time that we see Rivendell on 0.96, 99% sure that it will be, because I don't like to use the same map too often in close proximity of one another, and obviously it's only just over a week or so until we can start talking about the lead up to 0.97, which is good to hear. But obviously Rivendell is one of WK's creations, and interestingly enough, I think certainly during the lifespan of 0.96, Rivendell is probably one of the creation of his that I've shown off the most, which is kind of interesting considering it was one of the first alongside Edoras that he made. I suppose, you know, people don't use Dol Amroth quite so much because you certainly need 8 players to really get the most out of Dol Amroth, otherwise you kind of get lost within it, it's so vast. And I also know what his next project will be. I'm not sure whether he will finish that before he is stolen away by National Service for 6 months, but at the very least I know what is on the distant horizon, if nothing else. But we are going to be seeing Rivendell, as I said just previously, and the player who sent me this replay as I try and get out of this hole here was the Steward of Dale, and he was very interested in me showing this one, so I imagine it's going to be quite a competitive affair and quite close and back and forth and a lot of good play within it. So we'll go through the army compositions first of all, of course, starting with the attackers, and I believe based on the colours of the deployment zones at any rate, it is going to be a law-friendly battle, which is nice to see. So good versus evil, evil on the attack, trying to take Rivendell for themselves, and we will start off with Florian Fail 2005 here, who's going to be playing as Isengard, which of all of the Orc factions, they are the most, overall, they're the most professional in terms of the way that their army is laid out. Angmar as well, to be fair, can field quite elite armies, but overall, Isengard do have that sort of, that quality about them which makes them kind of close to a Western Kingdom of Men. You can certainly see the influences there, which certainly makes sense from a lore perspective for Isengard, considering Saruman created them and Isengard's geographical location. But he has got some Uruk-hai Raiders, which ironically enough are the unit which perhaps bears more in common with their Orc brethren, certainly more focused around their numbers, not very quality focused, but even so, the numbers will still be very useful in trying to force their way into Rivendell, which will be the key to success here for the evil faction. Several units of Uruk-hai Raiders, in fact just the basic variant without the darker leather that they get when the armour upgrade is present. We've also got some Dunlending Clansmen, which, I mean, to be fair, this is a fairly solid unit for Isengard all around. They may not be completely free. Like all of the other Orc factions have got a unit which they can field for nothing. The Snaga Stalkers, the Goblin Infantry, and the Orc Fodder. The Dunlending Clansmen are the cheapest unit Isengard have. They are still very cheap, to be fair, a pittance compared to a lot of other militia units. And also, in addition to that, they are a Dunland unit, which means in addition to the spear bonus versus cavalry, they also get the Dunland bonus against cavalry, considering they're mortal enemies of Rohan. So they are actually a very good unit for dealing with cavalry, a very cheap unit that you can use for that purpose. In a match like this, unless the defenders have got cavalry which they intend to sally out with, which, to be brutally honest, on Rivendell is unlikely just because of the shape of the map, they are very much still going to fulfill that fodder role that units like that are traditionally reserved for. A couple of units of Uruk-hai Archers, which again, next to the other Orcs, honestly, the Isengard Archers, because they are lower in man count, they do lack a little something, because obviously in 0.96 especially, just having more men in the unit for your archers is king, and also having them cheaper is also very, very important as well. Cheap archers with a lot of manpower is the way to go. That will of course change in 0.97, but what won't change in 0.97 is the fact that the Uruk-hai Archers are pretty much a token effort from Isengard to have archers. They will still fulfill the role of a cheap archer, but there are certainly better, both in terms of quality and in terms of doing the job of a cheap archer like this. But still, I'm a big proponent of bringing sort of a ranged pressure tool to use as the attackers when you're in a siege, because if you have nothing, it just gives the defenders free rein to shoot into your units without any sort of response. So at the very least, Isengard brought 3 units of them, so they can at least fill that role for their team. Some Warg Riders as well, which, to be fair, again, they are mostly an anti-cavalry tool, but in this case, I would suggest that it would be a good idea to leave them in reserve until the later game, and then when a gap appears in the defences and then the chance to get in to the settlement of Rivendell presents itself, Isengard should absolutely take that, because Wargs, certainly for a little while at least, while their hit points last, can be quite difficult to get rid of, but as soon as they disappear, of course, it's going to be difficult for them to stay alive for too long, considering their lower skill and low armour. We also have the Uruk-hai Infantry, of course, which are a very solid line infantry for Isengard. They always will be. Certainly one of the defining characteristics of their faction, the sort of the central unit that they have, which is decently armoured, decently shielded, overall a very strong unit, which is actually slightly more expensive and slightly better than most of the standard men-at-arms units that the Western Kingdoms of Men can even field. So while you may pay a pretty penny to actually field them in numbers, you will be rewarded for doing that, should that be the tactic you decide to go for. One of the other central pillars of the Isengard army is of course the Uruk-hai crossbows. The stopping power of crossbows is well documented, and it's certainly a big part of what Isengard are all about. Their archers most certainly aren't the central focus of their long range, well, of their ranged units in general, but their crossbows most certainly are. Very, very useful tool they have available to them. Crossbows in general, if your faction has them, then they're a very useful thing to bring, especially in a siege like this, if you can get them into a good position for firing. Uruk-hai Berserkers, which of course very good armour-piercing shock troops. While their hit points last, they're difficult to bring down. Similar to Wargs in many ways in that respect, because as soon as their hit points are gone, their lower skill and their completely non-existent armour will really make them suffer, and they will start to fall away pretty quickly. The other of the three central units for Isengard is of course the Uruk-hai Pikemen, which again, as far as pikes go, they are a little bit more expensive than the cheapest of pikes. But it is worth every penny because the increased armour will make them substantially tougher, and their stats in general, their damage, their skill, all of that sort of thing is going to be higher. We have the Trolls of the White Hand as well. Take a good look at the kind of mole man type aesthetic that the Trollmen have got. The Trolls of the White Hand have got going on at the moment, because they will be being given a substantial makeover, which of course anyone who's involved with Reforged at this point will have already seen. Of course, the Trolls of the White Hand will be substantially better looking in 0.96, brought more into line with the Olag-hai and the Cave Trolls and the Cave Troll Drummers. I believe the Angmar Trolls are also getting the same treatment as well, which is good to hear. And then there's some more Uruk-hai Pikemen. There's also the mighty Nazkai, which as far as a bodyguard shock troop in this game goes, they are certainly one of the most devastating, one of the best multiple HP shock units in the game. We shall see how well they perform in this battle. The second attacking army is Angmar, played by Explain, which Angmar are a very brutal faction to deal with in this sort of situation. Just their presence in 0.96 in a siege like this, which is based heavily around choke points, Angmar are such a good faction to have on the defence or the attack, to be fair, although you see them more commonly on the attack, being the Orcs. And it's because of this unit, the Barrow Wights, which of course are extremely tanky in 0.96. They will be losing half their HP and gaining a lot of movement speed in 0.97 to sort of make it so they're more user-friendly for those using them, but less annoying to deal with for those facing them. So it's really a win-win situation there. But as for now, Explain will be able to use their tankiness to potentially brutal effect if he can really start to wear down the defenders within Rivendell itself. Snargerstalks, of course, cheap fodder, completely free fodder for the first unit. This is going to be a very interesting unit to behold. The Witches in a siege like this are often the sort of unit which, if they are used to their fullest effect, can decide the battle in favour of whoever is using them. We shall see how well they can do here though, because I happen to know that the two defending factions certainly aren't hurting for archers, which are the Kryptonite to Witches. The Witches are very expensive as well, so if you can kill them without them doing any damage, that's a big win for the defenders, so certainly a double-edged sword there. We also have the Angmar Marauders, which of course the cheapest of the line infantry that Angmar can field. Usually you see them at the very least accompanied by the higher tier Guardians of Khandu, which again can be viewed as being a similar sort of level to the Uruk-hai infantry, only a little bit more focused around defence rather than attack. The Blackwatch Legion are another very effective tool that Angmar have for attacking settlements, because they can push through enemy lines with their huge mass, and of course the fact they can defend themselves from arrow fire with those big shields of theirs. Good armour as well, but in melee, they aren't capable of dishing out a lot of damage, and if they do get caught in melee against a unit of, at the very least, decent quality, they're going to start to suffer pretty quickly, and they aren't cheap either, the Blackwatch Legion. Then the Witch-Round Pikemen, which again, similarities can be drawn with the Isengard Uruk-hai Pikes, although usually they aren't brought in as great a number, although to be fair, I think he's brought 3 units of them there, even potentially 4 units, which would certainly push him into the red limit, which is risky, because it does mean that you're not going to be able to spend money elsewhere. And then he also has some Trolls of Gundabad, so he's brought the Witches, but he hasn't got the Witch-Round Hammerguard or Blackguard, which you will usually see, to be quite frank, from an Angmar army in this situation. And then finally we have Shiro Pendragon, who is going to be playing as the Kingdom of Rune, the devastating Easterlings, of course, the Scion Rim, which are heavy spears, which can, I believe, increase the morale of their nearby troops. They certainly do that in 0.97, which of course they are quite expensive, but they're also very tough to bring down. But the rest of the golden units on the front line, the Flag Rim and the Gamp Rim, are both armour-piercing units, which again will be somewhat useful in this fight, although not entirely, as we will see in just a moment. Eastron Guard are an interesting choice for an offensive siege as well, because their main weakness is of course arrows. Their armour values are not super high, and also their main focus is also around dealing a bit of anti-cavalry damage, which you're much less likely to see on a map like this. Carmel's chosen though, a good bodyguard unit for your general. We also have some Eastron Clansmen. It looks like 2 units of Dragon's Wrath Crossmen, so some interesting compositions here on the attack. A second unit of Camels chosen as well as a unit of Catapult and some Eastron Clan Chiefs. So an interesting force by Rune here. It's actually a pretty decent supporting army, but they certainly won't be able to pick up the slack all on their own. They're going to have to leave that to the Orcs. But we shall shift over into the main settlement. The Steward of Dale, as I'm sure you've already noticed, is playing as Dale, so that's very fitting indeed. Which means, of course, we're going to be seeing a lot of archer action, I would imagine, but also some very solid infantry. Having said that, the Greenwood Lumbermen are not particularly solid infantry, a little bit more focused around dealing a bit of armour-piercing damage before they inevitably get killed by their lower defensive values. But even so, the AP will be useful, certainly against the 2 Orc factions today. We also have the Athala Rangers, which of course in a defensive siege any unit of Rangers is going to be absolutely devastating, and the Athala Rangers are no different with those body-piercing projectiles. We have one of my, one of my more favourite unit models that was added in 0.96, and that is the upgraded unit of Bardian Marksmen. So this is the upgraded armour with the sort of the chain and the lamella, as well as those nice helms they have. Almost a sort of, well, certainly an Eastern look that they have going on, the Bardians, so almost like boyars on foot, or Devor are they called? I don't know, the archer that was in, the sort of higher tier archer that the Russ use in most medieval strategy games. We also have the Lake Town River Patrol, which, as cheap javelins are always going to be a very useful thing to use in a situation like this. It allows you to save a bit of money but potentially deal a lot of damage. And then we have a very solid front line indeed. The Swordmasters of Karnan, the Heavy Swordsmen of Dale. They trade in a bit of armour compared to their peers from the other Western and Northern Kingdoms of Men, but they are still obviously very, very good at dealing damage and a little bit more skillful. But the other Dalian units are most certainly more heavily armoured. The Elves of Escaroth, very, very heavily armoured line infantry, as well as the Barding Herd, very, very heavily armoured and shielded halberdiers. Very, very useful units to have in this situation indeed, and I would imagine it's a similar story over here. Indeed it is. Lake Town River Patrol backing them up as well. Bardian Marksmen upgraded once again, and then a very key unit for Dale, of course, the Blackshot Dragon Slayers. Hugely effective if they hit the right targets with their handheld wind lances. And when all's said and done, they're a pretty devastating unit in melee as well, so certainly the sort of thing that you're going to see Dale bring a lot. We also have a Dalian Ballista back here, and there's a few more units heading towards the town centre. We also have the Girians Paladins, which is good to see, as well as the Barding Herd and more higher tier units from Dale, as well as the Dalian Royal Guard actually back towards the town centre. Girians Paladins, of course, very good AP shock troops, and then his ally today going to be Death Eater playing Mirkwood, so another archer focused faction, although in a different way, a little bit more focused around their damage and their accuracy rather than their ability to trade with the opposition. The Thurney Tower, of course, can hide, but are also much more damaging than your standard human archers. And then, of course, we also have the mighty Yaragwe Inanwe, which, honestly, like a unit like this, you know, the Blackshot Dragon Slayers kind of get a pass for being AP, but a unit like this is not super efficient in 0.96 just because of the lower unit count. But we'll see how well they can do. They can still be very effective, but you certainly need to use them later on in the battle to really get the most out of them, otherwise they'll just get focused down with their lower unit count. The majority of Mirkwood's army, however, is over here getting ready to receive Angmar. We'll see if they have the mass to withstand that assault. Certainly they have the skill. A couple of units of Thandrum E. Erin, as well as backed up by some units of Thurney Tower. The Maitha Ilaz Gallan are going to be very, very important to really break up that Angmar assault with those javelins, of course, very nice AP damage. A unit which Angmar will struggle to deal with, honestly, without any of their super high tier infantry is going to be the Hiri Lung, just because those heavy elven swordsmen can be absolutely brutal to deal with in a prolonged melee engagement if you don't have anything to knock them out quickly. We also have some more Thandrum E. Erin, so some spears, offering a bit of mass potentially if they get into formation. Some Hiri out as well. Strong elven line infantry is always going to be a problem as well for most other factions to go up against because they're so good. More Hiri Lung, more Maitha Ilaz Gallan. And then back here, of course, we have the mighty Yarit Thalion Inanwaith, which the Palace Guard, are almost as good as most of the heavy swordsman bodyguards in melee, but they also add an anti-cavalry bonus to that, which, considering there are wargs and Eastron clan chiefs on the field, might not be a complete waste here. They also have their heavy archers, the Hiri Peng, as well as the Adadirith Amon Lank, which of course axes in melee. Then finally, the last thing the attackers wanted to see, but always going to be an obvious pick for Mirkwood, the Delupeng, EM and Dwyer, which of course Elven Rangers have got a bit of extra damage compared to human and other rangers of the sort. I suppose Orcs do technically have rangers in the Lurtz hunting pack. And I suppose you could say the Blacklock Engineers are dwarf rangers of a sort. But still, I will make a little cut because, of course, with Rivendell it does take the attacking armies a little while to march into position, so I will rejoin when the battle commences. So here on the overgrown path to Rivendell, you can see a unit of Snaga archers, which was hidden, is going to be advancing into position, getting ready to fire. And interestingly enough, this is a very bold move from Mirkwood, because I can't help but notice that those Hiri Lang are going to be charging right towards the Snaga archers, but actually X-Blane there lost his bottle a little bit, because he could have got some really good value off these Snaga archers by shooting a couple of volleys directly into the front of the Hiri Lang. Not particularly heavily armoured. I mean, they are, for Mirkwood standards, pretty well armoured, to be fair. But that's still not great. I mean, a cheap unit of archers like this can do a lot of damage, and that could have been an overly bold move there from Death Eater, all things considered. But the rest of the Angmar army is moving forward, and of course Angmar's primary concern here is going to be trying to stop his army getting filled full of holes by the Mirkwood archers, because if it comes down to a pure melee fight, Angmar should be able to outlast Mirkwood here, considering Mirkwood have quite rightly put a lot of their money into their archers. Once again, he cancelled his shot there, which I'm confused. I mean, he could be doing tons of damage here. All things being said, though, I think this unit of Hiri Lang should probably just run back to the safety of the line of Thandra Mierin that he has sat up on that bridge, just because if he stays here, he's just going to get overwhelmed at this point. I mean, I can see the potential benefits to trying to chase him off and close him down in melee, because of course Snaga archers are going to get ripped to pieces by heavy elven swordsmen very quickly. But the downside to doing this is Snaga archers will be able to do a decent amount of damage. I mean, you can see that only one of them fell there because of the low accuracy the Snaga archers have, but Death Eater taking his men's lives into his own hands really there by charging them in, almost Last Samurai-esque really. But you can see that also Florian's Isengard army is going to be moving down here. It is interesting though that Angmar are fully set up over here, so I'd imagine this means it's going to fall on Rune to support both of the Orc armies as they move in, but certainly we've seen most of the killing done down on these choke points in the earlier phases when we've previously seen this map, so it's going to be tough for Isengard. Dale's front lines are not going to bend easily. Certainly the Uruk-hai pikemen could be a useful tool, but they certainly don't want to commit them too early, because otherwise the Dalian archers and javelins are just going to completely destroy them. You can see here that the old tactic of trying to push the siege tower through the lines, which, I mean, it kind of works. I mean, you can see here that it's just sort of phasing through. It's an interesting one, that. It's not really worth the trouble, in my opinion. The best thing you can do with siege towers there is just push them in to try and make it more difficult for the archers, which, to be fair, this does. It is going to be a bit more difficult for the Bardian marksmen and the Athala rangers to get anything done there. But speaking of getting anything done, I really doubt that these Uruk-hai raiders are going to make any significant gains up against a line of Earls and Barding Herd. The AP for the Barding Herd is not going to be especially effective against low-tier troops like this, but the Earls of Escaroth are going to be very comfortable in an engagement like this, relatively speaking. Meanwhile, back over on the other side of the river, you can see that the Snaga archers now getting into position, trying to get some shots off into the Mirkwood line, which, to be fair, cheap archers like this should be able to do a decent amount of damage, and it will force at least one of these Mirkwood units to respond in kind, which is, you know, one of the things which is very common to see in 0.96, the fact that, you know, as the defenders here, you're forced to engage with the Snaga archers, and you're not going to be able to kill them off as quickly as you maybe think you should, considering the relative levels of investment in both of these archers. And it's very easy for a cheap unit of archers to just move forward here, and it's going to be all profit for them. If the enemy don't shoot them at all, the Snaga archers are going to be able to pick away at the enemy lines and get plenty of kills. And if they do get shot, that's arrows that Mirkwood are not going to be able to use on Angmar's very deadly infantry line, which that is the idea behind cheap archers, of course, but they're just so effective at doing that in 0.96 that it's very good that 0.97 is going to be changing that rather substantially. Still, for this patch, X-Blane is doing exactly the right thing here. And it might be worth, I mean, he was doing this earlier on with his heavy swordsman, but it might be worth just budging his Thandra Mierin up a little bit here and forcing the Snaga archers into a bit of a retreat, because at least the Thandra Mierin have got shields, and they're not as important to the defence later on as the Hiri Lung would be. Having said that, the Witch-Realm Pikemen are also getting into place now. Meanwhile, as once again I find myself in the valley, again over here they're engaging on the front line, but I really doubt that over here Isengard are going to have such a good time. But you can see that once again they're trying to sort of split the line by using the siege equipment, in this case a ram. But again, you can't really see the Uruk-hai Raiders and Dununding clansmen really making too many inroads against the front line made up of Earls and Barding Herd, so Dale are going to be able to hold the line comfortably for the time being, but of course they're going to have to hold against the rest of the Isengard army, which is made up of sterner stuff than this, as well as reinforcements from Rune. Over here, looks as though some more Uruk-hai Raiders did indeed arrive on the front line, so the Earls of Askroth have been pushed back a little bit. But even so, with the support of those Barding Herd, the Uruk-hai Raiders are just not going to be able to make any sort of inroads. And of course, let's not forget that there was a unit of Swordmaster Karnan over here in support, but now it's just a unit of Lake Town River Patrol. And I do have to say that the Barding Herd, in this sort of situation, they are very, very good at absorbing pressure over a long period of time, just because they are so tanky in comparison to most halberdiers. The extra armour and shield value that they pack on, in addition to being as effective as a normal halberdier in melee, is a big deal for Dale, and it certainly fits their infantry approach at the higher level of having that armour, doubtless inspired by their close proximity to their dwarven neighbours in Erebor. And over here, yeah, like the Dununding clansmen are obviously not going to make too many inroads over here either. They're going to do very little damage against the superior quality Dalian troops that they are arrayed against. Meanwhile, over here still, very much a fight which is happening entirely at distance. Snaga archers trying to do the business. You can actually see that Dale have actually sent over some reinforcements as well, a unit of Barding Herd to sort of shore up the line a little bit. These Maitha Ilaz Galan have really been focused down though, and this is the problem they're running into. I think at this point they're actually just trying to sort of absorb the pressure, which is an interesting tactic. I mean, the Thurny Tower are here trying to fire back. You can see how efficient these cheaper archers have been. I'd be interested to see how Rune reinforce Angmar as well. They might sense that maybe Angmar needs less reinforcements, considering the level of defence Isengard are having to go up against, and the fact that Angmar, with their Barrow-wights and with their very tanky infantry in general, may be less needy throughout the course of the battle. We shall see as that skirmish fight continues. This melee fight, which got underway pretty early on, to be honest with you, is probably going to continue for quite some time yet, as Isengard will continue to throw themselves against the Dalian front line. You can also see that the Greenwood Lumbermen just in behind here, getting ready to reinforce when the line gets a little bit thinner. And their AP, to be frank, it probably will be kind of wasted on militia units like Raiders. Well, Raiders aren't militia, but the Dununding clansmen certainly are. Probably need to wait for the higher tier Uruk-hai there to really get the most out of their axes. Lake Town River Patrol in position. You can actually see some of the golden units coming forward. The Scion Rim are heavily armoured, certainly for the Easterlings, so the Greenwood Lumbermen, their axes will certainly help out there, as will the Lake Town River Patrol's javelins. Interested to see how aggressive Rune and Isengard are being on this side. They will of course take losses doing this, but it will also put pressure on Dale. And you'd have to say over a long engagement, the attackers can most certainly afford to waste a few more lives than the defenders can. But still, the Dalian lines are holding firm, as you would expect, considering the calibre of opposition they're going up against. You can see there that the Lake Town River Patrol throwing a few javelins into the advancing Scion Rim. You can also see the telltale streaks of the Ballista in the background over there, and the Ballista has got into pretty much the ideal position. If you can do this on Rivendell, you really should take advantage of the fact you can shoot across the valley. And of course the Athala Rangers are also in position over here as well, and they could carve through that front line, but for the time being they're content to let their infantry and their siege do it, which I agree with, to be quite frank. You don't need to go overboard on this. The siege should be more than enough. Yeah, you can see already there that a few telling shots from the Ballista, and already the cheaper and lower tier Isengard units are running for the hills. It will take more than that to break the Scion Rim, but even they're shaken. They're a much higher tier unit, so Isengard and Rune may have to rethink how aggressive they're being over here. On this side, meanwhile, looks as though the melee engagement is threatening to get underway as well, and once again I think they're going to try and use the siege towers to try and batter their way through the lines initially. Snaga archers getting into melee, and of course they will not make a dent on the Thandremy area or the Barding Herd. And this is going to be a tough front line to force their way through, to be quite frank, because Elven units in melee, with the higher melee defense they tend to have, it's going to be difficult. But if any faction can force their way through a tough situation through sheer brute force, it's going to be Angmar. With the Barrow-wights, with the Witch Realm pikemen, they're also being backed up by those Snaga archers still on the other side of the bridge. Here Pain have moved forward as well, so some heavy archers. Once again, we're seeing a bit of a forward defence, like they're not really taking full advantage of the cliff. They're going to try and hold this bridge, which is the narrowest choke point there is on this side of the map, but for me, even though that area is wider, just the fact you get some brutal overwatch fire from the cliffs makes it a much better place to try and make your stand. But still, Mirkwood can certainly make this work. A little bit of support coming across from Dale as well. Some of those Barrow-wights trying to push their way through with the tower. They're immediately going to be set upon by a bunch of angry Northmen and elves of Mirkwood. Forward come the Witch Realm pikemen. The pikemen and the Barrow-wights together, though, going to be difficult for Dale and Mirkwood to deal with. It's certainly going to be a long engagement over here. They're going to have to take the slow approach with. There's no fast way really to deal with the Barrow-wights unless you have Siege on station with a very nice shot. Meanwhile, more Uruk-hai Raiders, presumably the unit that actually came back from routing, has re-engaged with the front line. The Scion Room are still on the front line as well, but elite spears as they may be, they're up against a unit of line infantry which costs about the same as them, and they're up against the AP of Barding Herd as well, in addition to just having those axemen in and amongst the fight as well. So it's very difficult for the Scion Room to really gain too much of a foothold here. Forward come some more Uruk-hai Raiders though, but they also are depleted. And it's good to see here that Dale are not falling into the trap of using all of their archer ammunition really early on. And I actually agree with the fact they're using the Daily and Royal Guards ammunition, because it's decent quality, and also this means later on they will be able to engage in melee without the fear of not having used their ammunition, which to me is a good idea. And honestly, I would do the same with the Ardguay Nanwaith as well, because honestly their use in the late game as a heavy swordsman, while other archers take up the slack of shooting the enemy at range, might be more useful for them. Meanwhile, that is an interesting and early committal actually of one of the units of Dragon's Wrath crossbows, but considering the fact I guess they have more than one unit, they feel as though they can get away with it. But ultimately I do feel as though the projectiles look very impressive. This is Disaster, which we'll talk about in a moment for Dale. But while the projectiles look very impressive, it's mostly bark and very little bite from the Dragon's Wrath crossbows, unless you can shoot right down a line at point blank range, which is, if your opponent lets you do that, then more the fool them. But yeah, they can do a lot of morale damage, but honestly that is when they're at their most effective, when they're dealing damage to enemy morale rather than actual damage itself. Decent in melee as well, but still. For me, I maybe would have brought a unit of Sapphire Bladesmen as well, just because they can back it up with some pretty decent kill counts as well. While the Girian's Paladins getting onto the front line, which a lot of elite units being thrown around on these two choke points down here, holding back Isengard and Rune, which is an interesting thing to behold. I mean, the Girian's Paladins are a real statement of intent from Dale. It's like, you're not getting through here without a real fight, because the Girian's Paladins are a serious AP unit, which, you know, the Flag Room will find themselves hopelessly outmatched, especially when the Girian's Paladins are surrounded by this many bodies, even if they are only River Patrol. Meanwhile, you can see there that they are being shot by archers in the background as well. Not the Athala Rangers, I don't think. It is the Ardguay Nanwaith, which is going to force the devastating runic crossbows into a bit of a retreat, at least for now. We will see them later on, of course. Meanwhile, on this front line over here, I think they are, well, I mean, Dale is still certainly holding back the tide, but other than the Scion Rim, there's nothing super impressive that's really been sent over here as of yet. Some Blackrock Dragon Slayers there. Meanwhile, what is going on here? So this choke point is actually still holding, which actually it does look as though Mirkwood are actually forcing back the enemy, which is interesting as well. The Barrow-wights are still here, but the Barrow-wights don't have the most mass, which may be contributing here to the fact that Angmar are getting pushed back. Also, with a bit of application of some Elven mass, the Witch Realm pikemen having a little bit of a tough time of it. They're taking quite a lot of damage, and based on the angles, that can't be from archers. Unless, yeah, they're not shooting from way across the... I say that, they are getting some decent shots over there into the back lines. So overall, this has actually gone fairly well up here for the Mirkwood defence so far. Angmar will need to change tactic a little bit here, because if they to just sort of grind their barrow wights up against this infantry line here, that should actually play into Mirkwood's hands. The really devastating stuff, like the Delupang in particular, will then be able to focus on units which they will be able to kill quickly later on. Meanwhile, I mean, this is a statement of intent. This is, if they can get a shot off here, they could do horrendous damage to the defensive position that Mirkwood and Dale have set up. I mean, they killed off a lot of the Maitha Il Asgalan back there, but they didn't hit the infantry, which means they're not really going to be able to make too much progress, and they put themselves right in harm's way there, and you can see the Mirkwood archers immediately targeting them, and immediately the witches are starting to die pretty quickly. If they can get out of there, they will be able to use their ammunition later on, and I think they will get out of there. But still, that was not a completely wasted shot, but we've seen the witches be far more devastating than that. And interestingly enough, I think these siege towers are actually getting in the way of the witches here. If those projectiles had been allowed to travel, maybe they would have also hit this Hiri Peng here as well. Speaking of which, heavy elven archers, of course, good in melee as well as at range, and they're now being committed to the front line as well, supporting the elven spearmen and the Dalian halberdiers. Meanwhile, back over on the other side of the river, the main entrance to the settlement, we can see that some flag rim have been sent over here in support. That ballista, as we said before, has slid off the cliff in true medieval fashion. If you put your siege equipment too close to a cliff like that, you're inviting disasters like this to happen. But honestly, like, if at this point the ballista's a lost cause, so if the runic player wants to effectively waste his ammunition from his Dragon's Wrath crossbows of all things on the ballista crew, Dale should be very happy with that, honestly. What have we got here? Arguei Nanweth. Just pulling back a little bit. The Blackshot Dragon Slayers getting into a more advantageous shooting position. Swordmasters of Karnan have joined the scrap on the front line. Girian's Paladins have pushed through the lines as well, and they're now surrounding the runic force, which is now entirely responsible, as the rest of the Uruk-hai go routing, for keeping up the assault over here. But this is bad news for the attackers, because this initial force is now going to get slaughtered to the last man. Oh, excuse me. And I think actually the catapult crew was forced to retreat there as the Girian's Paladins push their way forward. Here come the Uruk-hai infantry. I mean, the Girian's Paladins are inviting the enemy to shoot them in the back. But I mean, the Girian's Paladins are going to be able to just smash their way through Eastron clansmen so quickly that they might actually be able to just push the front line back a little bit. So certainly a moral victory here for Dale, as they send the Isengard and runic invaders running for the time being. The next column of the assault is already moving forwards, however, and the Uruk-hai infantry getting into position here. The runic catapult crew is also back, so the potential for some point-blank hits also revealing itself. Oh, excuse me. Allergy season is a bad time of year for me. Well, Barding Herd, I'm amazed there's still River Patrol in numbers actually on the front line, because they're terrible in melee. But still they stand alongside their brethren. Blackshot Dragon Slayers in position over here at this point, which was... I mean, the Dragon's Wrath crossbowmen are almost dead. I can only assume that's the Blackshot Dragon Slayers, because Dragon's Wrath crossbows are multiple HP and solid to take down. Armour-piercing missiles, however, would do the trick pretty quickly. More arrows flowing into what's left. Looking a little bit thin on the ground, perhaps, the Dalian front line at this point. Joining the fray, however, some out-of-ammunition Bardian marksmen make for decent makeshift line infantry, but they're no substitute for the real thing. They're just going to be on the front line. Their armour will keep them alive longer than a lot of other archers when they join melee. But they are going to have to fight some stronger units now, as Uruk-hai infantry and Flag Rim are now making up the vast bulk of the assault. You can see the Warg Riders probably coming over here, potentially seeing the opportunity to try and push in behind the enemy lines. They shouldn't try it yet though, because if they do, there's still enough Barding Herd here that they would take huge damage trying to do that. And I think, I mean, there's still Javelins in behind here. There's another unit of Elves of Askaroth on the way forward as well, so the time is not yet right to do this, I don't think. The Eastron clan chief's also buzzing around. I heard that. There was some form of catapult hit, but allergies. I mean, this is a problem that Rune are sort of encountering here, the fact that they're right in front of this structure, which means a lot of their shots are just going to hit that. They got a nice hit into the Athala Rangers though. Athala Rangers sensing the opportunity to do some brutal damage to the Uruk-hai Berserkers, and Dale are pushing Isengard and Rune back on this choke point at the very least, but maybe getting a bit far ahead of themselves, because they're going to take losses doing this, I think, with the Runic Catapult right there. Losing that many Athala Rangers that quickly is not a good thing, certainly. Meanwhile, having a look over here, this is what Angmar specialise in. You can see that. What on earth are they doing here? Surely they're not out of ammunition. Maybe they are. Maybe the Dalupang did run out of ammunition. I mean, Angmar still have. Well, I mean, actually, to be fair, Angmar's force is looking pretty battered and bruised, so they must have taken a lot of losses just getting this far. The Trolls doing what they can against the Hiri Lung. So maybe the Dalupang did use their ammunition. If they did, then they can't have had the best angle to shoot into. So I would still question their ultimate presence here. But the Dalupang are on the front line, and slowly but surely you can see the Angmar force is starting to yield some results. I mean, you can also see the Blackwatch Legion in amongst there, but they're looking a little bit battered and bruised at this point, honestly, Angmar. So too are Mirkwood, of course. Like, Mirkwood honestly don't have too much in the way of infantry left. They're actually pulling back a few things toward the town centre. We shall see how this progresses. There's a lot of Barrow Whites that are left, honestly. I mean, certainly I think Angmar are going to be victorious over here. It's just a matter of how many Mirkwood can take down before this sort of rearguard action ultimately gets broken. I think they're trying to save as many as they can with some Thandrum Yeren also retreating. But Angmar are going to be victorious, but at what cost? Meanwhile, Bardi and Marksman still doing their thing over here, and once again, Dale actually doing a very good job at surrounding the attacking forces. And I mean, there's Uruk-hai archers right here. They could get a few nasty volleys off. I mean, the shields are not going to be an effect here for the Earls. It would be a simple enough task to do a decent amount of damage to them here, but as it is, Dale's surrounding this section of the assault, and slowly but surely they're going to be able to grind them down. I mean, you can see over here another column of infantry arriving, the Uruk-hai pikemen getting their pikes down and starting to poke and prod at the Earls of Escarol. Next time with patrol in position, you can also see the Blackshot Dragon Slayers. Therny Tower starting to fire away as well, so there are quite a few Mirkwood units over here as well, to be fair, so it's not as if it was just Mirkwood's entire army that has been ultimately defeated by Angmar on the other side. Decent hit there from the catapult, scything right through what was primarily Bardi and Marksman. There's still a lot of Girian's Paladins on the front line, honestly, though, and still Isengard and Rune really struggling over on this choke point to really make any kind of progress. The Argue Inanwe coming forward as well, so real statement of intent over here from the defenders. They're trying to reach the catapult. I mean, that much is obvious, but I mean, the catapult hasn't made any really telling blows. If they hit right in the centre of the Girian's Paladins and the Nanwaith, which, I mean, that was a pretty brutal hit at close range. There are the Argue Nanwaith. They have managed to sort of push their way through the line. There's only 17 catapult crewmen left, but forward come the Carmel's Chosen, so elite units being traded back and forth here, which honestly is good to see. Shows that neither side is shy of committing forward their better units if they see an opportunity or if they need to, which is good. Too often I see people trying to sort of save their elite units, and it's to their detriment. Meanwhile, I mean, I'm surprised Mirkwood is still clinging on over here, but I suppose it does show how effective heavy elven swordsmen can be in melee. The Hiri Lung still holding back the entirety of what's left of the Angmar army from laying siege to the other side of the settlement. Even still, the Barrow Whites are so slow that it will take Angmar to actually take a while for them to get over to the town centre in a force which would actually be able to threaten the defenders. So we could see the Barrow Whites' lack of speed actually come back to bite the attackers here. We'll see. The Elves doing their best. Of course, it's difficult to break the Elves as well, which means they will stand and fight for longer, which every kill counts for the defenders in this situation. They're going to be able to kill off some Blackwatch Legion here as well. which is really going to help them out. I can only apologise for how disgusting I sound with allergy season in full effect. Meanwhile, Earls of Escalating victory seems certain. The Greenwood Lumbermen are wavering, which only 18 of them left. They're finally routing, of course. They're a very low tier axeman. They're used to cutting wood, not orc necks. But still, they did themselves a credit there because they stayed on the front line against pretty decent opposition for quite a long time. We'll see in the post screen how well they actually managed to do. And who knows, maybe in the town centre they will be the ones to pull out the victory for the defenders. Lake Town River Patrol now also joining the fray. Again, they're pretty trash in melee, to be honest with you, but at this point just having more manpower on the front line. To be fair to the attackers as well, individual units like the Flag Rim here, they are broken now, but they've been fighting on the front line for a long time, to give them their due credit. Another statement of intent by the attackers as they continue to pour the pressure on the defenders as the Trolls of the White Hand come in. Indeed. And against Bardian Marksmen and Lake Town River Patrol that are out of ammunition, the Trolls of the White Hand will easily be able to rack up the kill count, although the Blackshot Dragon Slayers will be a substantially less easy foe for them to deal with. How's this assault going? I mean, there's still the Athala Rangers trying to sort of shimmy into a good position here. Some point blank strikes coming in from the catapults, but I think this is maybe finally where Dale and Mirkwood start to suffer a little bit on this front line. You can see there's a lot of Carmels chosen. The Eastron Guard have been committed forward as well. It's just a matter of numbers at this point. I think there's a lot of good quality units on the front line from Dale. Swordmasters of Karnan have been committed forward. They look like a fresh unit as well with 75 men. Girian's Paladins, only 18 left, but they're strong enough that that's still a substantial number. 35 Arguete Inanwe, so the attackers will need to commit more over here, but eventually you feel as though this pressure is going to tell. The defenders need to win on at least one front, so they have something left to fight the inevitable Angmar force, which is going to come at them from the rear, which will include Barrow-wights. Yeah, the announcer doesn't think too strongly of the defenders' chances either. And this is a big part of that. You can see how devastating this unit of heavy trolls has been. This front line, which has held on for a long time in this battle, to be honest. I mean, the Athala Rangers are going to be able to get a decent amount of kills into this blob, but they're not going to be able to help kill off the trolls anymore quickly. And the trolls are what's doing the damage. They've managed to send all of the, a lot of the Dalian army over here became out of ammunition skirmishers. And Trolls of the White Hand are going to be far, far too strong for those sorts of units to deal with. And there's still a long way to go in this fight, so whatever the attackers do, it's probably not going to be a decisive blow, which actually does confuse me a little bit, because I mean there's Warg Riders here. The Eastron Clan Chiefs are also charging in here as well, so I mean with this sort of cavalry pressure, it's almost looking like the sort of situation which I would imagine to be like a game over for the defenders. And yet there's still more than half the fight to go. Actually no, that's... Well, there is more than half the fight to go, but only a little bit. And I mean, you can see here that the defenders have lost more. Balance of power is not looking great for them, and this is exactly the sort of thing they don't want to see, because a good charge from a unit of Spear Cav like that is going to be enough to do a lot of damage. I mean, the Mighty Ilazgalan are going to do some damage on the approach, but yeah, that's exactly what they didn't want to see. A charge into the Athala Rangers. They may be Spear Cav, but they're still going to be able to do a lot of damage, although to be fair, they just sort of bumped into the Athala Rangers there, and the Rangers gave as good as they can get. As good as they got. On the front line here, still the defenders fighting hard. Some Hiri Peng, Arguete Inanwe still fighting. There's not many Girian's Paladins left at this point. Neither is there many Carmel's Chosen left either, which is just going to leave some Eastron Guard, and there's not too much left in reserve over on this side, to be honest with you. Isengard and Rune are running out of manpower, but that breakthrough on the other side, under normal circumstances, I would suggest that this here is the last thing you want to see as a defender. Forward comes some Thandrum Yeren, forward comes some Hiriouth, the Mythic Asgalan pulling back a little bit. Trolls the White Hand have lost a few of their number, but they're still strong enough to cause major issues. Uruk-hai crossbows trying to get into a good position, but the Thandrum Yeren stabbing a few of those Uruk-hai for good measure. Meanwhile, finally over here, what was left of the Hiri Lung and Delupeng, Eam and Weir on the front line was forced out the way. It's not exactly the most terrifying army that Angmar have left, but it might be enough, honestly. Just another angle that they can attack the settlement through. But it's going to take them a while to get there. There's still Barrow-wights, there's still witches in there actually as well, which I'd forgotten about, to be honest with you. That's the danger of the witches. If you forget about them, they can be the death of you. Meanwhile, the Warg Riders, they're just sort of rubbing up against the Thandrum Yeren, which is absolutely not what they want to do. They only have 11 of them left. So, I mean, to be fair, the attackers have not punished the defenders as much as they maybe could have at this point, and the defenders are still in with a chance here. It's a slim chance, I must say. They're still in with a chance. Mythic Asgalan halting the advance of the Carmel's Chosen, but the Carmel's Chosen should get the upper hand of that fight. Therny Tower. This here is one of the reasons why you want a unit of good quality infantry going up against trolls if you can help it. You can see here the Hiriouth. The trolls had already taken a lot of damage by being on that very crowded front line, of course, but the Hiriouth they've got the stuff to finish them off, which is saying a lot. The Trolls of the White Hand are not the easiest unit to fight. The Aragwait Inanwaith have been pulled off that other front line, and they're coming over here to reinforce, but I would suggest that, I mean, there's a few units of Carmel's Chosen which have been set upon by what's left of the Athala Rangers. Certainly pockets of resistance, more than anything else, still fighting over here. But honestly, as well, over here, with the loss of the Carmel's Chosen, it's proven to be a pretty brutal encounter. I mean, there's not many Bardian marksmen left, and you would imagine they're probably going to break, but there's really not much of Rune and Isengard over here. They may break through, but what are they really going to have to bring to bear to the engagements within the castle? A catapult, perhaps? Those Uruk-hai archers still have ammunition, which is a big deal going into the late game. Your kingdom for just a handful of arrows. I was going to call them a bushel then, that doesn't make any sense, does it? A bushel of arrows? Meanwhile, this is another impressive unit the Dales still have left. The Dalian Royal Guard, this is exactly why you would want them in your army, because they're a very strong, heavy swordsman, even when they don't have any ammunition left, and with a bit of elven backup here, I would certainly back them to finish off what's left of this unit of Carmel's Chosen. They're outnumbered. And over here, the elves are actually going to force Isengard back out of the settlement, so the elves had just enough in reserve. Thranduil holding his swords backwards like a real edgelord. There goes the runic general. But yeah, I mean, the elves and Dales should win this fight down here now. Having a look at what they've got left, I think Isengard and Rune, I think their days are numbered, and this is another very important unit that the defenders still have left, much like the Dalian Royal Guard. Just as much for their abilities in melee at this point as their abilities at range, because those armour-piercing axes combined with the elven skill is going to be so important for trying to finish off Angmar, because Angmar of course still have a bulky enough force to cause concern for the defenders. The defenders certainly need to finish Rune and Isengard off as quickly as they can so they can put up a defence over by the town centre. They still have a few units left over there so that the town centre can't be stolen away from them. It's over here. So some Hiriouth have moved over here to support the battered and bruised Bardian marksman. And with Hiriouth over here, that is certainly going to be the end of the Eastron Guard, you would imagine. There's a few Uruk-hai on the front line there as well. In fact, that's Nazkai of all things. Maybe it won't be all that easy. Even with just a handful of Nazkai, even a quality unit like the Hiriouth is maybe not going to have the best of times. But those Nazkai, they are battered at this point, so they must have been on the front line for quite some time. So there's a credit to Dale that they've been able to do so well against a unit which, in theory, should do so well against them. Armour piercing, really strong. Very good unit for Isengard all around the Nazkai. Now moving in from the back there, you can see the Thandrum Yeren, another unit of 57 Elven Spears going to be joining the fray. So yeah, I mean, Rune on the verge of their own demise here, alongside what's left of Saruman's host. What have we left here in the town itself? Not much. The Argue Inanwe Guardians of Khan Doom are down here, so actually Angmar have sent over some reinforcements and all things, a unit of heavy infantry. Between some battered Argue Inanwe and some Thurny Tower. I don't know, I mean it's certainly going to be enough to hold them at bay for a little while, but I just think there's not many of them left. That's a worrying sight as well. Dragon's Wrath crossbowmen. I've got actually a nice blob of Dalesmen, Bardings. They can shoot into over here, but I think now they're just going to reposition themselves. Getting a good shot with the Dragon's Wrath crossbowmen is honestly 90% of the challenge with them. It can be so difficult because they're like the ultimate divas of the crossbow world. Most crossbows, you can still use them when they have a bad angle, even if you lose a lot of their effectiveness doing that. Dragon's Wrath crossbows, they're like, nah, we're not shooting. We need a perfect shot. Everything must be perfect for us to function. And to be fair, there wasn't many Dalesmen left when those Dragon's Wrath crossbowmen actually loosed their volleys. What's going on here? Witch-Realm Pikemen moving into position. And this is the issue with the Barrow-wights. It stretches out your army so much. The Barrow-wights are still marching up that hill super slowly. And those Witch-Realm Pikemen just getting poked and prodded by the Elven and Dalian archers, which are going to be over here. Just a single unit of spears going to be blocking the way, and they're going to be relying on their arrows to do the damage. And that's fine, because those Barrow-wights are going to take so long to get over here that I would say that Rune and Isengard will be long dead by the time they do. Dalian Royal Guard joining the front line as well, which should be enough to swing this fight in favour of the defenders. The Guardians of Khan Doom dipping into Shaken for a little while there. Their rusted armour and shields, enough to keep them alive against common riffraff, but against the Dalian Royal Guard, they're not going to have it quite so easy. Meanwhile, there's still a fight going on over here. There is, and the defenders are winning it. Uruk-hai archers being committed to melee. Bit of a desperation call that. The catapult crew's also coming back. There's not going to be many defenders left after this engagement, to be fair, but they should still win it. Uruk-hai archers and catapult crew are no threat at all, and there's not many Eastron Guard left. Elven spears and heavy infantry stand in their way. What is this? There's a runic general back here, sort of being shanked by a bunch of woodcutters. The Greenwood lumbermen trying to finish off what's left of the Carmel's Chosen that were in behind the lines. Meanwhile, you can see that we haven't been away from this engagement for too long, and already the Guardians of Khan Doom have really been chopped down to size by the Dalian Royal Guard. I do like the Dalian Royal Guard. Focus on heavy armour, those long swords. Again, archers like this may not be the most impressive at range, but I think this shows that just the fact that they're so strong in melee in this sort of engagement means they do still have a place in .96. Even if I do feel as though they aren't as strong as they should be in .96. .97 will overrule the archers anyway, as I keep saying, so it's a bit of a moot point, really. Meanwhile, Snaga archers moving into position. Angmar do still have some ammo, which could still be a pretty important point. It's also worth saying that the way the announcer sort of calls it, like, we don't stand a chance in this fight, may God have mercy on us, it's the Barrow-wights, with the amount of HP they have, do skew that a little bit. So it is quite possible that it's much more even than the balance of power or the announcer is suggesting. There goes another general. The Isengard general being run through by the Argue Inanwe. The Athalion Inanwe, they're around here somewhere. Unless they got committed to a big blob fight and I didn't see it. I mean, it's possible they died over there, to be honest. Meanwhile, Thandramierin holding back a very depleted unit of Witch-Realm pikemen. Have a little look around, there's not many Bardian marksmen left. The Dalian Royal Guard continue their advance forward. Alongside what's left of the Thurny Tower, there go the Guardians of Khan Doom. Hopping over to the other side of the hill. Some point-blank shots from the Dragon's Wrath crossbowmen as Thranduil leads the charge with his men. Oh, excuse me. Dragon's Wrath crossbowmen trying to run, but honestly it's futile at this point because they've got no one that can stand in their way. The elves are just going to follow them to the ends of the earth, and the Dragon's Wrath crossbows at the very least will be able to put up a good fight in melee. Honestly, they may even be able to win this fight in melee at this point, with how battered and bruised the elves actually are. I mean, Thranduil's in here as well. He's charging right on in here, but he may have bitten off a little bit more than he can chew. He may end up meeting his doom at the end of one of those waved blades. Get some kills for the moment though. Honestly, look at the way Thranduil's holding his swords. He absolutely watches anime on the regular. Getting shanked, another one of the Dragon's Wrath crossbows. Meanwhile, Blackwatch Legion pushing their way through as well. They're trying to sort of shore up the line with some additional heavy swordsmen and some Athala rangers, but the defenders, I think they're going to have to commit forward something a little bit more substantial than this, or they're going to have to continue shooting. I mean, the Blackwatch Legion will be able to resist a lot of that arrow fire, but the Angmar units are shaken, so the liberal application of some arrows may be just what is called for. The Snaga archers are shooting into the elves as well, so they may as well shoot. I mean, they need to either shoot or move. That is the choice that Death Eater has before him, and he is going to shoot, which is good to see. I think the Aradirith and the Hiripang, I mean, one of them's going for the Snaga archers, which I'm not sure I agree with really. Just trying to focus down and kill as many of these Witch-Round pikemen as you possibly can. So it comes down to just Snaga archers in the late game. You've got nothing to worry about from them in melee. They are going to offer nothing. What have we here? One Nazkai remains, standing proud as he sort of marches into the settlement. Well, well, well. We haven't seen Thranduil's death come up on screen yet, so yeah, the elves turned around and came to his aid. I was wondering why half the elves were breaking off and going backwards. There was no need for that. And that's going to be the end of Rune. There's just one crossbowman remaining, which honestly the elves still need to chase him down and kill him off, because just one Dragon's Wrath crossbow in the late game can, you know, represents a decent amount of power, and those two Hiri Lung are going to chase him down, which is good. So, the action is now almost entirely going to be focused in this section of the settlement between Angmar and what's left of the defenders. And I can see why there's still such a long time left in the game, relatively speaking, because the Barrow-wights are involved. Most of what Angmar has left doesn't necessarily get a lot of damage done quickly, but it is very difficult to wear down. As the pikes get lower, some Therny Tower, some Bardian Marksmen just dribbling in here, just very depleted units, but all they need to do is just apply a defensive wall to this area. Interested to see what this one Nazkai is doing. I mean, is he being chased at this point? There's the Daily Royal Guard, which 37 of them is significant, although to be fair, I mean, there's not many defenders left if I'm being honest. There's still the elves that finished off those Dragon's Wrath crossbows, which, not a completely inconsequential force, but neither is it super scary. The Daily Royal Guard are one of the most significant units left on the field. There's still 37 of them left. They're a very strong unit in melee. This is another very important unit, the Aradirith, again because of their abilities in melee as well as being able to shoot at range, but again, just the fact that, you know, Angmar able to just poke and prod at range with these cheap Snaga archers. The Witches could yet be a very important factor as well. Can Angmar pull this one out of the bag? The Barrow-wights are still plodding their way over here. They've taken a long time to get to the front line, which is the downside of using them, and the other downside to this is that pretty much all of the Witch-Round pikemen have been finished off at this point. And they're now relying on Snaga Stalkers to make up their front line against Elven Spearmen, which, needless to say, is not ideal if you're rooting for Angmar here, which, considering it's Orcs versus Elves, I wonder how many people are hoping Angmar win here. Attackers versus defenders as well. Certainly the pantomime villains of the piece at this point. This is interesting though. I mean, the one Nazkai is over here. Is he hoping that he can just sort of sneak his way into the town centre when everything's engaged? Because then pulling stuff off an already engaged front line could be disastrous for the defenders. And 3 ballista crewmen are not going to be able to kill off a Nazkai. Snaga Stalkers still holding down the front line pretty resolutely, honestly. I'm surprised at how well the Snaga Stalkers are actually doing. The army is tiring, is it? Well, the good thing for them is there's not many Bardings left on the field. Bardian marksmen on the front line. I mean, I think there's a couple of Barding herd. There's 1 Barding herd left. Well, I mean, the announcer is still not fancying the chances of the defenders. Some Daily and Royal Guard just shuffling their way into position. Surely they're not going to try and go all the way around. I mean, they could, but it would take them so long to get there. Aradirith shifting their position. I mean, you can tell that last time we saw them they had 58 men. Now only 45, so the Snaga Archers doing the right thing here by killing off this dangerous unit, which honestly is not that heavily armoured and doesn't have multiple HP, so very efficient use of his cheap archers there from Angmar. Now the Snaga Stalkers are shaken. It's probably about time. They've probably been riding their luck as those Athala Rangers and Thandrumi Erin continue to slaughter the Snaga like pigs. And the Snaga will not be still on the front line when the Barrow-wights arrive. I feel fairly confident in making that prediction. Those poorly made swords, and it almost looks like they've got sections of barrel and crates for shields, which again, it's really no comparison, especially when you look at how nice the Dalian armour and shields are. Certainly very heavy duty. Elves a little bit more about finesse. So what do Angmar actually have left? 75 pikes, the Witchers, what's left of the Barrow-wights. I mean, he might have pulled the trigger a little bit too soon on this, to be honest with you, with the Nazkai. It's a sneaky move, but it's also very easy to deal with. They're just, I mean, as soon as the Daily and Royal Guard shuffle their way over here, this one Nazkai is not going to be able to withstand all of that. Still, I mean, it's within the rules of the game, I suppose. I mean, it's maybe not the most sporting thing to do, but if this is the sort of thing that he waited a little bit for the Barrow-wights to engage with, for the Witchers maybe to do a little bit of damage, could have been the sort of thing which the defenders wouldn't have been able to respond to without their front line breaking. Could have been pretty decisive, especially if the defenders go on to win this now. The ballista crew are on their way over, pulling out those hand axes. This is very much like a sort of lifelong soldier who's like one of the most skilled at his craft in the world, going up against sort of 3 farmers who've had an axe thrust into their hands. Not going to go well for them. We will rejoin their story momentarily. The Snaga have of course been completely slaughtered, and then I think they routed into the enemy. Always rather amusing when that happens. Now the Barrow-wights shuffling their way in, which will prove to be a much sterner test. And the ballista crew stopping the countdown, one of them dying for it, oh my word. Sent flying by the pointy part of that sword. I can't imagine that was too comfortable. And of course, the ballista crew being slaughtered to the last man. Absolutely brutal. But Thranduil and his mates are now here. And this is going to be the end of the Nazkai, so the elves showing the poor human farmers how it's done. Thranduil, though, he's a smug boy, so he's probably feeling very happy about those events. Barrow-wights now shuffling their way into position, and this is the end game of the fight now. The Snaga Archers are still back there. There's still Barrow-wights. I mean, how Angmar uses the Witchers is going to be who determines the victor here. If they can get a brutal shot right into the middle of all of the Dalian and Mirkwood infantry, then the defenders won't have the manpower left to withstand the Barrow-wights. If they don't, though, then they should have what it takes to withstand the Barrow-wights and the Witchers. And here we go, they're reloading. They're behind a lot of stuff as well, so they're not going to be able to get shot. Here we go, they're reloading. They're going to shoot. Any second now. They're going to do it. I believe. Nope. Come on, witches. You can do it. You can at least shoot. You don't even necessarily have to hit, but if you just stand there, fire magic in hand, and just get shot, that will be the real tragedy for the Angmar player. This front line is now exhausted as well. I mean, it is wise of the defenders here to keep their units in reserve. The Royal Guard are actually flanking around. I'm not sure if 37 Royal Guard are going to be able to kill off 100 Barrow Wights. They may have been better off consolidating their forces, the defenders. We still have a few missiles left as well from some Hiri Pang and some Aradirith, which very important for dealing with the Witches, but considering the angle, even Elven Archers are struggling to hit their mark here. And we are within the final 10,000 frames. Having a look at the percentage of kills, the defenders have pulled ahead by a single percentage point, but this is not a poor attacking army which they have left. Witch Realm Pikemen is, well, actually technically the Snaga are the weakest unit they have left, but this weakest melee unit they have left is Witch Realm Pikemen. The rest, Barrow Wights and Witches. Not the easiest force to deal with if you are the defenders, but this is going to be mightily close. I don't know, the defenders don't have all that much left in terms of powerful units anymore. I mean, it's certainly going to be disastrous for them if the Witches get a shot off, but I don't think they can. Because I think actually the angle, while it's not great for the Elven Archers at the bottom of the hill, it's not great for the Witches either. If they shoot, it's going to arc over the defensive infantry. If they get super close, they might be able to hit the Elven Archers, I suppose, this unit of Hiri Pang. You know, getting 25 kills at this point in the battle might be enough to determine the victor. I don't know. I just don't know. It's definitely one of the hardest battles to call, purely because the Barrow Wights are such an enigma. Like, it's so difficult to keep track of how much damage they've taken over the course of a fight. So, like, they could just start to drop like flies within the next 5 seconds, but it could be that they've managed to maintain their hit points relatively well, and the defenders will slowly be ground down. Most difficult indeed. I mean, one thing, the Witches there, you can see them pulling back. I mean, if the Daelian Royal Guard get too close, the Witches are going to turn around and fry them. But it does at least force the Witches to consider the fact that the Daelians are there. And if the attackers have to commit everything over here, the Daelian Royal Guard will be able to surround them. The Aradirith will be able to attack from the front. But it's going to be really difficult, I think, just for the defenders, honestly, because they have very little in the way of really quality units in numbers left. I mean, you can see the Ardgwei Nanway here on the front line. Thranduil's in there somewhere. There's only 5 of them. There's hundreds of Barrow Wights. And the Byzantine announcer is also sharing my skepticism of if the defenders can win this or not. A few arrows hitting their mark. Snaga archers pulling out their blades, just adding their manpower to the front line at this point, I think. The Witches are in there somewhere as well. There they are. You can see so badly that Exflame wants to use that Witcher ammunition. If he could just get a shot into the heart of this infantry here, particularly if he can hit a good chunk of the Aradirith, that would be pretty much game over. Can he do it though? Aradirith pulling out those axes, over 40 of them remaining. Can the elves make this happen? They'll be able to kill off the Witch Realm Pikemen pretty quickly. Snaga are already shaken. There's still over 100 Barrow Wights on this front line. The Witches also pulling back a little bit. There's still that 100 Barrow Wights back there. The Daelian Royal Guard pulling the Witches away. I mean, if nothing else, they're at least making it so that the Witches can't set themselves up for a nice shot. And here come the 25 Hiri Pang as well. So this is pretty much everything that the defenders have committed at this point. Is it going to be enough to force back Angmar? We'll learn that pretty quickly, I think, honestly, because the Barrow Wights are marching over here. 101 barrow wights. They are starting to die at this point. There's not many Witcher on pikemen. There's not many Snaga left. I think Angmar are actually running out of room for manoeuvre as well. They kind of need to use the Witchers as soon as they can, but the silver lining to being pushed back is the fact that the angle, which up till now has actually been protecting the defenders as much as the attackers, will cease to be a factor and the Witchers will get a clear shot. And when they do, that will be the defining moment of this fight, because they'll only have time for one shot basically. They may not even have that. You can see Athandrimi Erin has managed to sort of infiltrate the lines. There goes the shot. I mean, it killed a lot of the defenders, but it also went right through the attackers as well, causing the Snaga to break, the least important unit, but still. It didn't kill off many barrow wights at the very least. But, I don't know, I mean, I still think that's a rather inconclusive shot. It did kill a lot of defenders, to be fair, but yeah, there's a lot of barrow wights to cut their way through. And they still had to deal with the Witchers in melee, which they may be nowhere near the powerhouses that the Nazgul are. They're still strong in melee individually. And I do think ultimately it was, while it hasn't been a complete waste sending them over there, I think the Daily Royal Guard they're needed over here so badly. They're a multiple HP unit which has got a lot of armour as well. Really survivable on the front line. And over there they're just being zoned out by the Witchers, and that might be the difference between victory and defeat here, honestly, because you can see that there's not many Aradirith left, only 19. I don't know. Athandrimi Erin defeat seems certain. There's not many defenders left. I think the Daily Royal Guard, they've run out of room for manoeuvre. I think they need to come in here now. They need to accept the fact they will probably get grilled on the approach as well, but if they just sit there dancing around, oh, excuse me, that could well be the end of the defenders' hopes. I mean, they're doing their best here, the defenders. And that unit of barrow wights is down to 62. They're starting to die off more quickly, which indicates their hit points are gone. Which means just the one with 100 left has got the full survivability left. Some officers still there. Still 17 Aradirith. Victory seems certain at this point. The Witchers sort of getting in and amongst the barrow wights, so that at the very least the Daily Royal Guard won't be able to hit them in melee immediately when they arrive. It's so very close, and obviously a big chunk of the battle has just been happening on this cliff at this point. Feels like ages ago that Rune and Isengard were sent packing. What are we down to? 97 to 97. This is one of the closest siege battles I've ever shown, actually. I can certainly see why Stuart of Dale was so eager for me to show this now. Very little in the way of pikemen left, but still the barrow wights proving to be solid on the front lines. A few Hiri Peng which have managed to sort of squeeze their way in and amongst the barrow wights, but the outcome of that was rather predictable. But now the Witchers, they're reloading, but I don't think they're actually going to be able to get their shot off before the Royal Guard get into position. Now the Royal Guard definitely need to bunch up as close as they possibly can to make it as difficult as possible. The Witchers could end up grilling their own men if they fire there, though. There's a lot of barrow wights in the way of them. It's a real grind, but you can see the defenders are running out of manpower. If I had to predict, it would be a heartbreakingly close defeat for the defenders. The Witchers, though, not able to get their shot off, and I mean, the Daily Royal Guard, it's better late than never. They are now in melee. They are now lending their expertise to trying to kill these barrow wights off. But the elves are really running low. I mean, Thranduil's still alive, you can see him. There he is. King Brand also still alive. The Witch King's vassal, the one with the big old thorned mace, is also still alive. Which means the Witchers are in melee now with the Daily Royal Guard. Not the worst fate really for the defenders. Barrow wights are starting to take losses, you know. Just 50 left in one unit, 86 in the other. It's still a lot though. Still substantially over 100. whereas the defenders have noticeably under 100. Now that is, I mean, it's a move, because that killed off Barrow Wights as well, but it did kill off defenders. I mean, it's probably again a bit of an even split, question mark. Yeah, I mean, I'd say that's an even split. 32 Barrow Wights left in one unit. There's still over 100 men. That was a risky move to make. Again, they're gonna kill their own men if they do this, surely. That probably was not an even split. They killed off about 5 defenders. Well, there goes Thranduil. He's been burnt alive. But I mean, it's a big move to make. I mean, to be fair, the Barrow Wights seem to be, the ones that aren't hit directly seem to be surviving this. But I mean, are they also losing their hit points from this, which would be an interesting question. There's still a few Aradirith left, but I mean, to be fair to Explain there, he did manage to polish off what largely remains of the Elves, which will then put the entirety of the responsibility for the victory on the Dalian Royal Guard, which they're starting to lose men as well. I don't know. There's still a long way in this fight to go, though. What? Is there anything left back here? I don't think so. There's this guy. Is he the hero that they need? Probably not. I don't think that a Greenwood Lumberman is going to offer too much. There's one Heary Alth as well, which may join him. I mean, he'll be in the town centre at the very least, perpetually routing. The Aradirith is also running back to the town centre, perhaps in the hope that the Dalian Royal Guard can soften them up enough for those literal 3 men to kill them off. Victory seems certain for the Dalian Royal Guard. I'm not sure. I mean, those fire blasts must have had an effect on the Barrow Wights' overall hit points, because they're dying much faster now. And this was a unit which wasn't in melee as long as the other one. The one that has 18 men was in melee for longer. Aradirith Amon Lank, he's not getting away. What are the Dalian Royal Guard doing? I think they see the danger here, because that one, the general for Angmar, is going to be able to kill the Greenwood Lumberman and the Heary Alth. But Dale don't have the luxury of chasing him here. They're going to have to hope that they can kill the remaining Barrow Wights within the timer, which killing the Barrow Wights quickly is not something that tends to happen. Fair play to the Royal Guard though here. They're really putting these Barrow Wights in the ground. And based on the amount of frames left, I feel as though this fight is actually going to come down to who wins it properly, rather than the timer. I could be wrong. I mean, 4 minutes. Yeah, I would say so, because it's going to take him a little longer to get there as well. 20 Dalian Royal Guard, though. These absolute units. King Bran there, killing off another one of the Spectres. Only 34 Barrow Wights remaining, in addition to the 9 from the other unit, so they may very well end up doing it. What heroes? Meanwhile, this guy, hoping to spoil everything. This brave lumber... There's no way that he gets into melee without breaking, surely. The Witches, I believe, cause fear. He actually landed that blow. Surely not. There's no way that the Angmar general is going to be felled by this one dude. Yeah, indeed. It was always going to be a lost cause. But the Heary Alth has returned, and if nothing else, he is delaying the Witcher. He's delaying the Angmar general, which he needed to. He laid down his life, because I think the Royal Guard, honestly, based on how quickly those Barrow Wights were dropping, are going to win that fight. Yeah, they are. They're definitely going to win it. And just delaying that general, I think, has sealed the victory for the defenders here. The Barrow Wights, you can see that when their hit points are gone, they really do start to drop very, very quickly, because their stats are very low.
For the moment, the fortune of battle goes our way.
They're going to do it. Yep, the announcer believes as well. The defenders are ahead by 1%, and I think that's going to be how it remains. King Brand and the few companions he has left.
Our enemy has command of the castle.
There's the Hiriouth, steady and exhausted. He can at least stop the countdown as well, so there's no way that the Angmar general is going to be able to just sit there, sit the countdown out. Hiriouth will be able to stop the countdown, and the general, still with 2,000 frames, but you can see there the Daily and Royal Guard are on their way down, and there's nothing the Barrow-wights can do to stop that because they're so slow. And the speed of the Barrow-wights has played an important part in the outcome of this battle, honestly, because if they were as fast as... To be fair, in the next patch I don't think the attackers would have won with .97 mechanics anyway, purely because the Barrow-wights would not be able to take the same level of punishment as they did here. But the speed also played into it, so there you go. It's also worth saying that the Witches of Angmar as well, like, going through their own Barrow-wights with that fire, I think dealt damage to them which allowed the Daily and Royal Guard to actually win that. But, I mean, it had to be done from the Witches. I can't criticise the Angmar player for doing it, because if he'd left it as well, there would still have been Elven infantry from the other side. The Angmar general killing that elf in a single blow, which finally Merc would have gone from the field, but it doesn't matter because Dale, those 16 Royal Guard, this might actually be the closest fight I've ever shown. Because the defenders are going to have like quite literally 16, maybe 15 men left by the end of this. You can see how exhausted the Daily and Royal Guard are, plodding into position. And there is the general. He is going to tackle them head on. Getting another kill. I feel fairly confident in saying this is the closest match I've ever shown. At least of a very similar sort to the to ones I've shown in the past. Still waiting for that mythical battle where there's only one dude left at the end. But this is pretty damn close, honestly. Barely over a dozen of the Daily and Royal companions. That's going to be it. Dale victorious. Mirkwood fallen, but also victorious, and the attackers just narrowly missing out. That was fascinating to behold, actually. And I'm very glad that the Steward of Dale sent this one to me, because this is a fantastic battle. One of the final ones to see off .96, because it shows... While .96 does need tweaks, and .97 has addressed a lot of the more glaring issues with it, this goes to show that even currently, on the current active build, you know, Reforged is a very finely tuned beast. And yeah, very well done to the two defenders, RH clan. But yeah, I don't think any of the attackers did a particularly bad job. I mean, you could argue maybe that Rune's composition wasn't ideal, but they were intended always to be supporting the other two as they advanced, because they advanced alongside Isengard and Angmar, more with Isengard. And I do feel as though the Isengard and Runic Assault was dealt with very well by Dale. And yeah, I have to give the MVP to Dale there. How could you not? You know, they performed brilliantly in the first phase, alongside with a bit of Mirkwood support, to be fair, but mostly Dale to throw off Rune and Isengard. Then in the late game, just about managing to make it there. And I was thinking there that holding those Royal Guard in the back would have ended in defeat, but ultimately it was exactly the thing that needed to happen. So goes to show what I know. But yeah, the MVPs have got to be the Daily and Royal Guard here, regardless of kills, and they may even actually, well, actually no, the Athala Rangers have got more kills, but the Daily and Royal Guard proving that an archer that's good in melee can be worth its weight in gold in a siege when you're the defender, and late on you need that power play to really see you over the line. Daily and Royal Guard going toe to toe with Witches and the Barrow-wights and coming out victorious. Elves of Escalating doing very well in the early game as well, holding back that assault from Rune and Isengard. A lot of men they had to face down. Barding Herd, differing fortunes, but one got over 250 kills, so it goes to show how tough they can be as well. Lake Town River Patrol are quite cheap. Blackshot Dragon Slayers maybe not getting as many kills as they could, but the Athala Rangers, of course, as Rangers are always going to make up for that. Over 420 kills. And then down here, 483 kills on the Girians Paladins as well, who did really well on the front line against Isengard and Rune as well. Swordmasters of Khanan with differing fates as well, differing performances. Ballista did poorly because, again, made the mistake of parking it right on the cliffside, which anyone who's played Reforged, and I know Steward of Dale's been around for quite some time in the Reforged and Medieval 2 community at this point, you're really taking your fate into your own hands when you put your artillery right on a cliffside like that, because 9 times out of 10 with how Medieval 2 works, it's going to go falling off the cliff. And the Greenwood Lumbermen, actually, they did a credit to themselves as well. You know, they stood and fought, and that one brave man got in the way of the Angmar general, making sure that beyond all doubt, Angmar would not be able to claim a victory through taking the town centre. So big thank you to Stewart of Dale for that, because that was thoroughly enjoyable, and the defenders won just about. It was super close. It was on Rivendell, elven aesthetic. You know, it's got all the things which people tend to like, so I hope that people approve of it as much as I do. And it's a fantastic, one of the last battles we're going to show on 0.96 certainly, so a fantastic way to show it off really, or see it off I should say. So big thank you to watching, big thank you to Stewart of Dale of course. This isn't actually going to be the last siege that I show on 0.96 though, there may be a couple of others that I receive replays of in the near future, but there is actually, like I said in the last replay, a dwarven settlement that I've never seen before, but it has the feel of how Khan Doom used to be, where it was in the game files but not properly utilised in sort of a multiplayer capacity. I'm not really sure how to explain it. It looks kind of like Erebor, but it's not the version of Erebor that I remember, unless I'm just being retarded and it is actually Erebor, but still. We shall see, but we will be seeing that dwarven settlement next as a siege battle. I'm not sure whether it will be the next battle up straight after this, but it will be very soon regardless. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did, and I hope you will join me for whatever is next.